welcome to the Vets Talking Pets podcast. From scales to tails, real talk with real vets. No pet subject is off limits. With your hosts, Dr. Maggie Roberts and Dr. Vanessa Howie. Hello and welcome to this next edition of Vets Talking Pets. And today we're going to talk about dog breeds. And to start with, we're going to talk about where they actually came from. And we have to start at the beginning, don't we, really? The origins of the domestication of dogs.
We do, because it's important to understand really where dogs evolved from, isn't it? Because it explains a lot about their behaviour and why breeds can be so different in their shape and their size and even their temperament as well, because there is such a big variation, isn't there, between dogs?
Yes, much more really than any other species. And interestingly, dogs were the first species that man domesticated. And I suppose that makes sense when you think about the fact that before we farmed, we wouldn't have domesticated things like cattle or sheep. And dogs were first domesticated when humans were hunter-gatherers and they hunted a lot of large prey. And the DNA evidence suggests that about 30,000 years ago, during the last ice age, what would become the dog started to evolve from a now extinct population of grey wolves.
Which is really interesting, isn't it, as well? Because that's the sort of time when the Homo sapiens started to kind of come into their own, as the Neanderthals were kind of reducing in number, and Homo sapiens and dogs obviously kind of evolved at the same time, which...
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. And also it's believed that dogs domesticated themselves. And it was really that, or this is the theory anyway, that the more confident and less aversive, less sort of fearful individuals moved into human settlements because they were attracted by the smell of cooking meat. And obviously there were food scraps. And then the humans saw the benefit of having them because they guarded their camps or they helped with hunting. So they encouraged them. And then in the end, they actually selectively bred them. And they selected them for tameability first and then to help them with certain purposes.
Yeah, which makes so much sense, doesn't it? That actually getting that tame dog, which was of so much benefit to the humans, it's, yeah. And we're both social species, aren't we? Both dogs and people.
Yes.
So we need each other really, and together they've kind of helped each other survive over the years and strengthened that relationship because there's been benefits for both dogs and humans being close and together. But there's also theories that some of the wolves followed migrating herds of large herbivores and picked off the weak and ill, which kept the herd stronger. And so humans actually started to follow them and starting to hunt because actually they saw the benefit again in these wolves could actually help them.
Yeah, and the humans ended up going for the more healthy animals. The dogs had picked off the weak ones. And the earliest fossil evidence of humans and dogs living together is more than 17,500 years old, and it could even have been earlier than that. And obviously humans then sort of selectively bred the dogs to emphasise certain natural behaviours and also physical characteristics, things that were useful for us. And usually it was sort of part of the stages of dogs hunting. So just as an example, dogs, we know they have a fantastic sense of smell. And that was really useful for people because it could help us to track prey. And so those were the dogs that sort of ended up becoming what we call scent hounds, things like bloodhounds that are really good for tracking.
Yeah, and then we had others that were good at spotting prey and chasing. So that's led on to the sight hounds, isn't it? So those dogs such as greyhounds, which have brilliant sense of sight, and they obviously are really, really good at spotting prey a long way off and actually running really quickly after them as well.
Yes. And obviously then we used some of those dogs for sport, but that wasn't the original purpose as to why they were bred. And obviously there were dogs that were really good at fighting, and I suppose originally they were used because they were good at killing or even maiming prey just so that then the hunters could kill them. And that was the big dogs, things like mastiffs that were very powerful. And we also had dogs that were good at retrieving and bringing the prey back rather than just killing them. And that's like, well, retrievers, as their name would suggest, that they were used for once people had shot them with a bow and arrow or whatever, bringing the prey back.
It's fascinating, isn't it? How they really have changed, and we've got them for all these different purposes. Because actually, thinking about those that are good at rounding up prey, so herding dogs such as collies, and it takes me back to my time when I was lambing as a student.
Yes,
There I was learning the commands, so come by and away for collies, and they're amazing actually, that ability to be able to herd just with a command, absolutely amazing.
But actually when you watch sort of, a lovely Attenborough documentary or whatever of things like African wild dogs, when they're working together you can see that they're actually manipulating whatever group of herbivores they are, so you can see that that's really, it's come from those older dogs.
It's in those genes.
And
then you've got those dogs that are protective, so the livestock guardian dogs such as the German shepherds and the Akitas. And I love watching the videos, I don't know if you've seen them, of the Anatolian shepherds.
Yes,
they're massive big dogs, and they're there and they'll be up all night. It's always cameras with infrared so that you can see them guarding the sheep or the goats that they're around. And wow, they're amazing. They're so protective as well of the stock that they're looking after.
They are, and it's really interesting because in the UK we tend to think of sheepdogs as herding dogs because we no longer have wolves or anything like that. But when I went on holiday to Transylvania in Romania, we actually got chased by some guardian dogs because they do have wolves there, and so there were big powerful black dogs, probably not dissimilar to the Anatolians that you were talking about. We were in a horse and cart for various reasons, but it was slightly scary that these big dogs came out, but they had to be powerful dogs, and obviously things like Akitas are very, very powerful.
Very powerful.
And obviously they're the ones as well with really good duration and exercise tolerance, and this came from the fact that often in the wild they'll follow herds for a very long time, and so they had to be really good at running, and those developed into dogs like sled dogs like huskies, or even the carriage dogs like Dalmatians, because Dalmatians were sort of for show really, I suppose, that they ran alongside a carriage.
Did they? I didn't know that.
Presumably for whether it was protection or just to look quite posh. And that's why they need loads of exercise. I used to have a client who used to cycle with his 2 Dalmatians running each side, and then they're very happy when they're doing that because that's what they were bred for.
And then we've got dogs that like digging.
Yes.
I've got one of those. That's dogs such as terriers, and they really do like to dig.
And I did learn recently that the name comes from the French. Obviously, terre is earth, la terre, all that stuff. And so that's why they're called terriers. And yes, they're very good at digging out. And obviously some of the dogs you want more than one of those characteristics. So there were a lot of hunting dogs that were bred so they'd have a really good sense of smell, so they could track the prey, really good endurance so they could follow it, but also had the strength to help kill the prey. So lots of selective breeding happened, but obviously it was for their abilities rather than purely for appearance.
But dogs are the most variable mammal, aren't they, really, in terms of shape and size? And it is, I always find it is fascinating, so strange that we can go from a tiny Chihuahua to a massive Great Dane, and they're all the same species. And you don't see that variation in any other species, do we?
You don't. If you're an alien who came down to Earth, you would not believe that those 2 dogs belonged to the same species.
I always think you could fit a Chihuahua into a Great Dane's head. Well,
into its mouth.
Yeah, more than one into its head, exactly.
Yeah, and it's due to a sort of special feature, I suppose, about the sort of DNA of dogs called genetic plasticity. And that's really an ability to have all these different sizes and shapes. And it has been exaggerated by selective breeding. And originally, obviously, the dogs were bred for the best shape that suited the purpose. So, for example, the great greyhounds would be sort of lean and it's interesting because actually their body shape is quite like a cheetah's.
Yeah,
They're also very, very fast. And then other dogs, obviously, that need to be really powerful are much more sort of muscular, etc.
Yeah, and different coats as well. So they've been bred, haven't they, for different climates, that or how the coats have developed for different climates.
Yes.
Certainly, you've got those with really thick coats in cold climates and thick undercoats as well, through to the more, I suppose, the sight hounds that have this much finer, thin coat. Don't you? If you think of a whippet, they need a big woolly coating.
They do, and I suppose
it's
so they wouldn't overheat when they were running. And also, you've got dogs that perhaps had been more developed in hotter areas, like I suppose a Rhodesian Ridgeback, where they have quite a smooth coat because they were living in a very hot place. But how did they start to become pets?
That's the question, isn't it? And I think dogs really started to become pets amongst the wealthy. So those who didn't need to use them to hunt food, but they wanted a companion, a dog by their side. By the sounds of it, the Dalmatians, I think.
Yeah.
Alongside their carriage.
And a lot of the time, or this is, I suppose, the start of toy dogs, smaller dogs that people can have on their laps or in their carriages or whatever. And there's lots of evidence from fossils that the ancient Romans, Egyptians, the Greeks, Chinese, and some Mexican societies all had developed toy dogs, and certainly the first hairless dogs were Mexican, weren't they? I think it's the Aztecs who started to breed them. In Europe, it was more the Middle Ages. Though apparently the church didn't like it very much because they thought that to sort of give away food, in effect, by feeding pets, that was a bit sinful, and you should really give that food to poor people.
Oh, I see.
And so they weren't that keen on it.
But it was in the Victorian era, really, wasn't it, when pet ownership became much more widespread, really amongst all classes. So it became much more of a norm, therefore, to have a dog.
Yeah, dogs were really popular with the Victorians, partly because they were seen as embodying Victorian values, because they were seen as steadfast, loyal, plucky. That's a great word to describe dogs, and being courageous. And they started sort of standardising breeds, and they quite liked collecting things, didn't they, the Victorians? So they started keeping records of their pedigrees, and a pedigree, strictly speaking, is like the sort of family tree. It's the bit of paper that shows the ancestry, and it doesn't actually have to be that it's a pedigree dog or what we would call a pedigree dog. It could be a crossbreed, but you just know what their relatives were. But they also started showing dogs, and that's why they really got a very strict standard for each breed, so that to win you would have to be as close to what they thought was perfect for a particular breed. So most of our modern breeds come from that controlled breeding by the Victorians.
I'm just thinking what today's values would be in terms of the Victorian values. Sorry, that's a little bit of an aside.
Yes, I don't know. It'd certainly be a little bit different.
Which species would fit today's modern values?
Oh, I don't know. That's, I suppose, I don't know, the designer crossbreeds, I suppose.
Maybe.
With, a bit more diversity.
So showing really is much more about appearance, isn't it, than function. So dogs have gradually become more extreme to fit in with what people think is desirable and fashionable, so what people want, or is more likely to win at the dog show, rather than actually what's good for the dog themselves.
Yeah. And this is, I think, when things started to go a little bit wrong with some breeds, really. Just to give an example, the Dachshund, and it is Dachshund, not Dachshund, were bred to hunt badgers, and they had short legs so they could get down badger sets. But for the show ones, they were bred to have much, much shorter legs. It was more exaggerated, and this has led to them having a lot of problems with their back, because they have a very long back in comparison to their height, and also a lot of joint problems. And we will be discussing all these sort of the problems of conformation in our next episode. Um,
So when selecting a breed, it's so important, isn't it, that we do some research and find out about the breed that you're actually interested in and about its history. Why has the breed become to look like the breed is like, I
yeah,
suppose.
and it will often explain some of their behaviour as well. For example, spaniels were bred to be really lively and agile because they flushed out and retrieved prey. So they're really busy dogs and they need to be occupied and exercised a great deal. And I always think actually a lot of the working ones are happier than some of the pet ones because they are exercised and they are occupied much more.
Yeah, and so border collies are another one, aren't they? They're highly intelligent and very active, as they have to herd and manipulate sheep, and they have great endurance. And the amount of distance that they cover over a day when they're actually out there working with the sheep can be colossal. And if they're not given activities to use up that energy and that intelligence, they will become bored, won't they? And they're difficult to handle. It's understandable, they need to be using their brain, but also they've got lots and lots of energy, so that's to burn.
And it's said that their intelligence is about the level of a 3 or 4 year old human. So you've really got to keep them occupied. And then terriers, as we said, they were bred to catch vermin, but also to dig out prey, and that's why they like digging. Very hardy, very tenacious and strong. They can dig up your garden. They can be really stubborn if they're not well trained. And interestingly, often people think of Yorkshire Terriers as being lapdogs, but they were bred to kill rats. Under weavers' looms in Yorkshire, obviously. So they had to be small to get under there, but they're still really feisty. And again, just carrying these little dogs around doesn't actually fulfill their behavioural needs because they come from a background of being actually quite tough.
That's right. They definitely are strong-willed as well, these terriers.
Terriers.
And we've got one who's determined to catch a mouse at the moment. So day in, day out, he's outside watching and digging and watching and digging. So yes, they're very, very strong-willed and very tenacious.
Yeah.
But there's dogs bred for fighting as well and blood sports. So thinking about the bull breeds, they needed to be fearless and powerful with a really strong bite. And they can be aggressive. And we know that some, unfortunately, have killed people. But I think it's important to mention here, isn't it, really, about it's the deed, not the breed.
Yes.
Thinking about, yes, these dogs may have been bred as fighting dogs, but actually a lot of it...
not every dog that is a bull breed is aggressive. I think the danger is really that they do have a very strong bite. So obviously, again, like any dog, they need to be well trained and well socialised. If they're encouraged to be aggressive and to fight, then it's a problem. But we need to look at each individual dog rather than sort of labelling every bull breed dog.
Exactly
and in law, it's for another podcast probably, but sometimes they are all made out to be bad but some individuals sadly have caused injuries and have even killed people.
That's right. I think we really need to talk about Labrador Retrievers though, because they're a fantastic breed.
Yeah.
But they were actually bred to work for fishermen in Newfoundland. And so they were bred to retrieve fish, ducks and ropes.
Yeah.
And subsequently they were used a lot as gun dogs. And as we probably all know, a Labrador, they are notorious for being greedy and can often become overweight. But the reason, what they were bred for was to have a layer of insulating fat to keep them warm in those icy waters of eastern Canada. So they needed to keep warm. So many of them, unfortunately, have got this genetic mutation that makes them feel hungry, meaning weight control is difficult.
Yeah.
But, it was there, it was bred into them because actually they needed it. It's an important survival.
Yes, and obviously the people who selectively bred them to start with didn't know anything about genetic mutation because it was quite a long time ago. So they were just selecting the dogs that had a good layer of fat. And yes, actually Labradors and other retrievers have been used as research models for human obesity as well. So that's an interesting thing about them, but it does mean weight control can be really difficult. But again, they are dogs that were used to being, very active, but sort of what you'd call soft mouth. They bring things back. They weren't the ones who really did the killing. It was more bringing them back, and obviously they're lovely and
And they will
make
carry
good.
something in their mouth
Yes,
all day long, won't they? And not damage it. So.
yeah, and
So
as
guardian dogs, yeah. So we mentioned these before, but they were
yeah,
bred to guard flocks and protected these flocks from wolves. But they can be overprotective and sometimes aggressive again because that's what they've been selectively bred to do. They were there as protectors for the sheep or whatever other flock of animal they were
yeah.
protecting.
And I sometimes think with some of the breeds, like some of the German Shepherds and Belgian Shepherds, they're really, really great with their own family because they've been bred to be really protective of them. But then they can be not so nice with strangers or people they don't know, um, and become overprotective as we've said. So it's really important that those dogs are very well trained.
That's it. And sometimes actually the videos that I referred to earlier, you can see them. They'll sleep in amongst the sheep, won't they, as
Yeah,
well? So they are so protective. And actually the wolves or the other predator won't see them because they're there huddled within. So yeah,
yeah.
it's fascinating.
And really, all dogs were bred for some sort of purpose, even if it was just playing with people. But they use both their sort of physicality and their brain. So it's very, very important that whatever the dog, and I know some are slightly more active than others and some are more intelligent than others, but they all need lots of exercise and lots of mental stimulation.
So what do you think about these dogs that get carried or are in pushchairs then, Maggie?
The ones that in the vet profession are technically known as handbag dogs.
Yes,
Yeah.
those ones.
No, I think it's terrible because that is not what they were bred for, or even in their natural state, what they would do. So even a little chihuahua or whatever needs exercise. They need to walk, and it's not good for them. Obviously, it can lead to obesity, but also just boredom because they're just sitting there. They're not sniffing because dogs,
Yes,
all dogs
dogs
love a
don't
good
sniff.
sniff. So yes, perhaps if they're older and they've got a problem, you might do that, but they shouldn't spend their whole lives being sort of either tucked under someone's arm or being pushed around in a pushchair or in some sort of rucksack. So yeah, that's
Yeah,
a
well,
really
we've probably
important thing.
all seen those dogs. What about crossbreed dogs though?
Well, crossbreeds can be absolutely great dogs. But I think what's really important to remember if you're selecting one is to think about what the parents or the ancestor dogs were, because they will inherit some of those characteristics. I mean, it might be that it isn't equally 50-50 the characteristics of the two breeds. It can be some of them will be more like one parent than the other, a bit like children. But for example, cockapoos, really, really popular, lovely dogs. They come from Cocker Spaniels and Poodles. They're both really active and excitable breeds. So those crossbreeds are going to be like that. I once met a lady who had a very lovely little black cockapoo, but she was surprised that it was so active. And I'm like, but you realise that they've come from poodles and cockapoos, cocker spaniels. They're going to be lively, so it's worth thinking about. So if you have a dog that has got a bit of collie in it or whatever, then you're going to have to really keep that dog occupied.
You are. In terms of size, I think that's an important characteristic, isn't it? We need to think about when choosing a dog breed, remembering that those larger dogs are much more expensive in terms of food, vet bills, medication costs,
Yeah.
and they need more space. They really do. So to fulfil their welfare need, they need enough space. Where if you're going to get a Great Dane versus a Chihuahua, so actually that Chihuahua, you could fit more Chihuahuas in the same space than you could a Great Dane.
You could.
So that flat might not be the right size for a Great Dane, whereas you could easily accommodate two Chihuahuas.
Yes. Yeah. And things like pet insurance is more expensive on the whole for the bigger breeds, isn't it? There's also certain breeds that have lots of problems that it's more expensive, but it's worth thinking about it. And the other thing, talking about small dogs, is not all small dogs are sort of soft or friendly, because some of them, as we have said, are feisty terriers. So I think people have really got to do a lot of extra research about breed temperaments, particularly if you have children. I mean, obviously we want them to be good-tempered generally, but a family dog really needs to be a dog that can be trusted with the children.
I can't emphasise enough in terms of doing that research and actually looking at those breeds. And if you're going for a breed or a crossbreed, isn't it, as you've said about the cockapoos, actually, yes, thinking about which ones will be best for you in your home and fitting into your family life.
Yeah.
And all breeds need exercise and training, Maggie. You talked about those little breeds being in pushchairs. I think we know how you feel about those. But some breeds will benefit definitely from specific activities, isn't it? Such as agility or flyball. We're thinking about particularly the colliers and the spaniels, the bigger retrievers, etc. So those that have got a lot of energy,
and
to be used up.
Even dogs that you might not think of as being dogs that would do that sort of thing, they can still benefit from it, even if perhaps they're not as fast. But I had a client when I was in practice who had a Cavalier King Charles that did agility, and it absolutely loved it and was quite good. Not as good as the collies, particularly the sort of weaving through poles and things like that. But it's certainly a really good way of not quite replicating, but sort of giving them something really positive to do.
And poodles have got speed as well, haven't they?
They're really fast.
Really
and obviously poodles were bred to sort of get waterfowl and things, weren't they? Particularly the standard poodles. I think probably the smaller poodles probably came later as pet dogs.
I think it was because people wanted a smaller version. They liked the look of the poodle, the standard poodle, and what they did, but actually they just wanted a smaller one to fit into their home, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And thinking about poodles, obviously coat type will depend how much grooming. Every dog needs occasional grooming, although some of the sort of wiry haired ones not so much. But a lot of dogs with those sort of curly coats or very long coats will need regular grooming and may need to go to a professional groomer for clipping, particularly things like the doodles, a lot of them, and poodles themselves. They don't have to be cut into funny shapes. They can just have a sensible cut. And even my sister has an Afghan, and she actually has that dog cut quite short because it was quite difficult to keep the coat.
That coat's so long, isn't it?
She has to go in very regularly to the groomers, and that is extra cost as well, isn't it?
It is, and I'm always envious of friends with their dogs with short-coated dogs, who can just run a towel over their dog after a muddy dog walk, particularly the weather we've been having this spring, and they're clean, whereas I've got a curly, long-haired terrier that is very close to the ground. And gets very muddy and knotty and dirty and disgusting, so has to have regular baths. So it is thinking about the time it takes and the actual commitment needed to groom, wash, brush, etc. with the coats of the dog that you've got.
And some breeds have specific health problems. We're going to be discussing this more in future episodes, because it is a big issue, thinking about what are the health problems that any particular breed may get. But anyway, whatever breed that you're considering, our main message
is do your research.
Do your research. Perhaps talk to people who have them, or talk to your vet, but do your research before you get them, because you want to have many happy years together with them, and you want them to be a pleasure, not a burden.
Definitely.
I think that covers quite a lot of stuff, quite a lot of food for thought. So hopefully we will see you next time. So
thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Vet Stalking Pets with Dr. Maggie Roberts and Dr. Vanessa Howie. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at info@advovet.co.uk. And please join us again for our next episode. Your pets will thank you.